Can a team like Ferrari risk his season, hiding a technical failure to his star pilot? And what happens when that pilot is Lewis Hamilton and his team leader finds out after losing a key GP? What you are going to discover about Baku 2025 is more serious than was thought. It was not a spectacular, visible, or constant failure. That was precisely the trap. What affected SF-25 was a progressive, intermittent, and therefore difficult to identify with diagnostic tools. The MGUK, an essential component of the kinetic energy recovery system, was not working linearly. During certain acceleration phases, especially leaving slow curves or in long straight lines such as Baku's, the system lost between 10 and 20 horsepower. That loss did not activate alarms. It did not appear in the graphics as an obvious failure, but it compromised subtle and lethal performance. Ferrari played with fire. He opted that the ruling would not be serious, or that it would be resolved alone, or worse, that Hamilton would compensate him with his talent. But modern Formula One does not allow improvisation. And what happened in Baku made it clear that this technical failure was much more than a minor discomfort. It was a structural error of internal management and a scandal that was about to explode. In Baku, however, everything overflowed. Ferrari had had a rhythm. The car worked well in long batches. Even Leclerc, with some setbacks, showed solid performance. But Hamilton was out of combat from the classification. Traffic stuck, without straight speed, unable to perform overtaking. When the technical team presented the post-carrier report, Vasseur read the data disbelief. The loss of energy in the hybrid system was not a new or isolated event. They had lived with that ruling for weeks, and no one had told him explicitly. The phrase that resonated most was brutal in its simplicity: "We have betrayed our own confidence structure." With that phrase, Vasseur made it clear that it was not a specific error. What failed in Baku was not only a defective MGUK, but the control and decision system of an entire team. How can it be that an energy failure is present from the preseason and does not immediately climb to the leadership team? What kind of technical culture is being promoted when engineers prefer to shut up rather than admit that the car has a factory defect? When the race ended, the atmosphere in the box was already strange. There was a mixture of resignation and annoyance. Hamilton had finished outside the points, with a car that seemed disconnected from the track. Charles Leclerc, although more competitive, had not lived up to expectations. But the most disturbing were not the results itself. It was the general feeling that Ferrari had lost a chance in a circuit where, by pure rhythm, they had been one of the best. That contradiction, having a fast car and not being able to use it, was what lit all alarms. Vasseur asked for explanations, demanded an immediate review of telemetry. But I didn't expect to find what he found. In front of him, on the data screen, there was the confirmation of something he had suspected for weeks. Hamilton's SF-25 had not worked properly. Not from Baku. From the first race of the season. And the most serious was not the magnitude of the failure, but the fact that it had been partially detected and filed as unfinished, not critical, requires observation. No report had come completely to his hands. No one in the line of technical responsibility had activated an alarm protocol. After the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Ferrari was forced to face an awkward truth. The data does not lie. And this time, telemetry revealed a pattern that the eyes had ignored for weeks. The SF-25 of Lewis Hamilton had a structural failure in its hybrid system that, although it did not generate terminal failures, it was draining return after return. A silent, intermittent, but constant defect. As a slow-action poison that undermined the potential of the car without causing visible alarms. The first concrete evidence arose in the deployment of the MGUK. This component, responsible for converting kinetic energy into electrical energy during braking and then releases it in the form of additional power during acceleration, was not working consistently. In Hamilton's records, energy maps showed fluctuations in the delivery of kilowatts, particularly in curve outputs and high acceleration sections. While the system should have delivered peaks close to 120 kilowatts constantly, there were times when 90 or even less were released. That difference, apparently small, represented between 10 and 20 horsepower lost randomly. The most serious thing was not the loss itself, but its erratic nature. The failure did not follow a clear pattern. Sometimes it happened on Tour 3, sometimes in 12. Sometimes only in certain sectors of the circuit. That confused the pilot, but also the engineers, who in real time did not detect any anomalous behavior in the pit wall dashboards. There were no software errors. No red lights were lit. But the car did not advance as it should. In a circuit like Baku, where the main line exceeds 2 kilometers and the hybrid system has a critical impact on peak speed, these losses were devastating. In the records you can see how Hamilton was unable to match the final speed of cars that, in theory, had less aerodynamic load and lower general efficiency. And even more worrying, there was no adjustment from cockpit that could compensate for this imbalance. Lewis simply did not have the necessary tools to recover that lost energy. It was literally running against an invisible enemy. But telemetry revealed more. The energy problem was directly correlated with a second technical phenomenon: chronic overheating of the front brake system. During a good part of the stint in Azerbaijan, carbon discs reached temperatures greater than 1,000 degrees Celsius. This not only increased wear, but altered the behavior of the ERS system in its regeneration phase. By heating in excess, the braking system affected the car's ability to recharge energy with stability, causing a domino effect that moved to the MGUK. The energy was not recovered efficiently, and therefore it could not be released when it was more necessary. This imbalance between braking, regeneration, and energy delivery generated erratic behavior in traction. From the outside, it seemed that Hamilton simply could not leave the curves with the same aggressiveness as his rivals. But now we know why. The SF-25, under these conditions, was not a fully functional Formula One car. It was an incomplete vehicle with a half-hybrid unit. And in this category, that is equivalent to being completely unusable. Another critical variable was the general cooling of the hybrid system. Ferrari had opted for an optimized aerodynamic configuration for straight-line efficiency, reducing air inlets to favor drag. But this philosophy had a price. In extreme conditions, the heat accumulated in batteries and the investor began to compromise yield. In Baku, with high temperatures in the asphalt and multiple areas of energy load and discharge, this structural weakness was exposed. The system could not be maintained within its ideal thermal margins. And that caused that, automatically, the software would limit power delivery to avoid major damage. Again, without shooting critical alerts, but stealing power horses just when they needed the most. In summary, Hamilton's SF-25 in Baku was not only broken, he was caught in a technical vicious circle. Brakes that overcome the system, heat that limits regeneration, defective regeneration that prevents effective energy delivery, loss of power that demands more from the pilot, and a pilot who has no way of knowing precisely why his car does not respond. That is the worst nightmare for any elite competitor. Feel that you don't have control, not for your own errors, but because your machine is failing from within. This data block, this complete portrait of technical dysfunction, is the one that was finally delivered to Fred Vasseur after the race, and is the one that triggered the internal crisis in Ferrari. Because beyond numbers, which revealed telemetry was a systematic failure pattern, ignored for weeks. A failure that explains why Hamilton has not been able to show his true level. The devastating for Hamilton was to discover, after the Azerbaijan GP, that this problem existed from the beginning, and that someone decided not to tell him. It was not a piloting error. It was not a bad strategy. It was not a bad day. It was a sequence of careers in which its performance was sabotaged from within by an undeclared technical failure. A failure that some knew within the team, but that never rose to their level or that of Vasseur, until it was too evident to hide it. The question that is floating after the Baku Grand Prix is not technical, but existential. Can Ferrari really build a champion team around Lewis Hamilton if he can't guarantee at least they won't let him compete with a broken car? What happened in Azerbaijan was not just a stumbling block in the points table, it was a break in the narrative that Ferrari has tried to build for more than a year. What comes now to Ferrari is not resolved with a technical patch, nor with a software update in the hybrid system. Not even with a new aerodynamic package in Suzuka or Ikola. What is coming now is a structural maturity test. The ability to recognize that it is not enough to have a world champion pilot, a competent team leader, and a promising car design. Something deeper is needed. A real culture, a structure where information flows without fear, where errors do not hide under the carpet, and where pilots fully trust those who are in charge of their destination every Sunday. And you, who have reached this point, what do you think Ferrari should do from now on? Restructure the technical team, change the internal address, or simply turn page?